How reliable is your memory? Can it withstand the power of suggestion? My name is Christabelle Kirkham, and I'm an 8th grader at Harrisburg Academy. This year, for my science fair topic, I decided to take a behavioral science approach and study influences on the human brain, specifically suggestion, and the power it has at influencing behavior, responses, and even memory. Under this broad topic, I focused on the question of how suggestions, specifically those of an authority figure, affect the decisions of an individual. I was inspired to do this project based on the idea of the placebo effect. If you are unaware, the placebo effect is a beneficial effect from a fake drug, which is attributed to the receiver's belief in the treatment. This is the basis of the power of suggestion. I decided to examine this further, to explore if the same belief that creates a beneficial effect from a sugar pill could change human memory. This experiment relies heavily on psychological instincts such as survival and emotional habits such as trust. It addresses the human desire to get the right answer and our proclivity towards lying in order to do so. Results from this experiment could be used in future to further tap into all the potential the human brain contains, to make surveys and interviews more unbiased, and even to potentially heal mental illnesses using the power of suggestion. My experiment specifically tested growing children between the ages of 10 and 15. Between 10 and 15, the brain, maturity, and suggestibility changes a lot, which is why I selected the age range, believing it would give me broader results. Suggestibility changes with age and mental growth, meaning that it was important to have an age range for more accurate results. Overall, I ended up testing 30 people. My independent variable for this project was the type of questions asked to participants, and my dependent variable was the participants' suggestibility. There were many controlled variables in this experiment, such as the photo, the time given to study the photo, and the amount of questions asked. My hypothesis was that if a question was phrased in a suggestive format, then the subject would be more likely to provide the proctor's intended answer because they doubt their memory. This experiment was relatively simple to conduct. After creating the survey, I gathered participants and tested them individually. I showed each participant a photo and gave them 10 seconds to look at it. Then I asked the aforementioned survey with questions ranging in levels of suggestion. From their answers, I was able to determine how effective the suggestions were at altering their responses as well as their memory. The data I collected proved my hypothesis correct. Most of the participants I tested agreed or were persuaded to agree with the false details in my suggestive questions. The general patterns in my experiment can be observed broadly or specific to each style of suggestive question. In terms of all suggestive questions, only 16.9% of answers remained unconvinced of the suggestions implanted in the questions. The remaining 83.1% of answers were split between automatic and persuaded agreement. 54.9% of answers automatically agreed with the suggestion implanted in the question, and the other 28.2% were persuaded to agree with the suggestions. This data is from across all questions and all participants, so as to get an average of how effective the power of suggestion was. From these results, it is clear that suggestion was influential in the majority of answers. My suggestive questions were split into 4 groups: shifting the focus of the question, adding positive affirmation, implanting false details, and finally, observation questions. From these 4 groups, the most effective method was shifting the focus of the question, from which 84.7% of answers agreed with the suggestion. This was followed by implanting false details, which was 81.7% effective, observation questions, which were 75% effective, and finally, questions with positive affirmation, which were only 60% effective. I believe this was because the positive affirmation questions were more obvious, whereas shifting the focus of the question was more subtle. As a final point, I asked participants to picture the image and then showed it to them again. Every single participant could find at least 5 details their mind had changed. And oftentimes, these details were from my suggestive questions, which is proof of how suggestions can and do alter memory. In conclusion, my hypothesis was correct, and the suggestions implanted in the questions affected both the participants' memory of the image and their answers to my questions. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed learning more about my project.